Jimmy, you can get the door behind you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the May 22nd Oklahoma City Planning Commission meeting and ask if you have pagers, cell phones, or any similar devices, if you would turn those off or silence them now, we would appreciate that. If you are not the applicant and you've come to address us on the matter today, there are sign-up sheets. They look like this. They're on the table right outside the council chambers here, and if you would complete it, we'll be happy to hear you when we hear the case. And with that, Commissioners, first order of business is the minutes of our May 8th meeting. Move approval. Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes, and those are approved. Next item is continuances.
Okay, we have 3 uncontested continuance requests. They're item B24, SPUD 752, to defer that case to June 12th. Item B25, SPUD 765, to defer to June 12th. And item B26, which is C6598, to defer to June 26th.
Is there anyone here who came to talk to us about items 24, 25, and 26 on our agenda?
Move approval of the uncontested request.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the uncontested continuances. Cast your votes. That's approved.
We have 7 new requests for continuance. Item B12, which is C6604, to defer to June 12th. Item B13, which is SP470, has been withdrawn. Item B18, SP468, defer to June 26th. Item B19, C6602, defer to June 12th. Item B20, PUD 1529, defer to June 12th. Item B21, C6586, defer to June 12th. And we had a new request for item 17, PC 10364, to defer to June 12th.
Is there anyone here today who came to talk to us about any of the items on our agenda that were just read? And those are items 12, 13, 17, 18, 19, 20, or 21.
Move the new request.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the additional continuances. Cast your votes. And those are approved. You vote?
Which one?
Oh, Nick's light's not on. Oh. Not working? Sure you got it? All right, now we have it. Thank you. Are there any additional requests? From the public, I should say.
Mr. Chairman, Dennis Box, item 22, SP 465. We just found out around 10:15 that there would only be 6 commissioners present today. We would appreciate a continuance to whatever docket this commission chose so we can have a full commission hear this matter.
Well, first of all, there is a large group of people here today planning to hear this case. Is there a spokesperson for your group that would like to counter that request?
Yes, sir.
If you would give us your name and address for the record.
My name is Richard Scroggins. I live at 5801 North Air Depot Boulevard in Oklahoma City. We're prepared to go forward with the case, sir. This is the 4th time they've requested deferral. Our people work, they have jobs. We just can't take off and come here, then cancel, and come here, then cancel. We're prepared, and we request that you go ahead and hear the case today.
I don't know what the prospective attendance is at our June 12th meeting. Commissioners, discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I have to leave here at 3:30. So if we're going to, I don't know how fast this agenda is going to go, but if that's the case, then there's only going to be 5 on the board.
Mr. Chairman, one thing, we don't have a variance on this, do we?
No.
So that wouldn't hinder it, but I'd like to try to hear it if we could, because we have continued and continued. I don't know if we could move it up on the docket or something like that, but I would like to move forward with hearing it, if all possible.
Anyone else, any comments?
Yes.
If you would please come to the microphone and identify yourself. I was actually asking the commissioners, but I'm happy to hear from you.
Yes.
Tell me your name and address.
My name is Michael Sanders, and I live in the Gregory's residential edition. And yes, I did take off work today just to be here to address this case. Would it be okay if we stand to show who all is here in opposition?
I have a pretty good idea, but if you want to do that, if you're all here in opposition or in support, well, opposition first. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. I'm inclined to think we should go ahead and hear the case. We've got a chamber full of people again, and
Yeah, I am too, Mr. Chairman. And plus, a lot of time has been spent with this application. We've had open public meetings, we've had private meetings, we've had meetings with the council, we've toured the facility. So it's a lot of time been spent on both our part and the community's part and the applicant's part. So I think it's just time to hear it.
And, Mr. Chairman, is it possible to put this item on the beginning of the agenda in view of what, Jim, your schedule is? And the other observation is that we've encountered over the years citizens in either protests or in support of applications who have spent time to come down here to have a hearing, et cetera, and we've been reluctant every time to allow those continuances when at the last minute the applicant says, oh, wait a minute, I don't want to do it today. I'm in favor of hearing it.
Nick?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not opposed to hearing the case today, but with 6 members here, it may be somewhat unrealistic to expect there will be 5 votes one way or the other. So that said, if we do hear it and we do not resolve this case with a recommendation one way or the other, what are we saying? Are we going to then continue it anyway? And or are we going to kick it to the council without recommendation? I think we should give some consideration to that, because frankly, I don't want to hear it today, waste all these people's time, waste our time, and then have it come back in 2 weeks and do it again. Anyway.
I'm afraid their time's been wasted already by, appearing several times.
I know we have been wasted, but what I'm seeing here is with 6, and obviously I can count to 5, it just takes 2 people here to not agree for passage or denial, and then what do we do? If we're not prepared to move it on, then we may want to reconsider that continuance.
I understand.
I would just as soon hear it today.
I understand that, but there's no assurance we wouldn't have 6 people here.
I understand.
At the next
That's why
meeting.
I would just as soon hear it today.
Your name and address, please.
Hello, my name is Vicki Miles LaGrange. My address is P.O. Box 796. I can provide my actual address in another forum.
That's fine.
I am here as a concerned neighbor in the Cedar Ridge about the issue of Cedar Ridge. We have been scheduled, every planning commission, I believe since December of 2013. We are just a group of neighbors who are concerned. We would pray the opportunity to be able to be heard today. If it could be recorded and we could put it on a disc for those members who could not be here today to be able to hear it. But please don't ask these people who have again taken off from work, and every time we get the notice, I got the notice this morning from someone who said it was being postponed again. I was in the doctor's office with my 93-year-old mom at her cardiologist. Everybody here has made a tremendous effort to be here again, and we would like to, and I hear what the gentleman, the Ward 8 Commissioner is saying, but if there is any way possible that we don't have to again ask all of these people to be away from work, we would be very grateful for that opportunity. Thank you.
Right, please.
John, I echo what Nick said. I want this to be the protesters to understand that you could sit through this whole meeting, potentially, we could hear this case, and it could ultimately still get continued. And so that was, I believe, what Commissioner Gale's point was, is that you need 5 votes, one way or the other. And so I just want you to, at the end of this, regardless of what happens, just be prepared that this ultimately could be continued again, regardless of your wishes or ours. You need 5 votes one way or the other. There's only 6 of us. Nick's point that if someone makes a motion that 2 of us don't agree with,
He's first.
it could ultimately get continued. That's what I think we want you all to understand.
I'm Pastor John A. Reed, Jr., pastor of Fairview Baptist Church in Northeast Oklahoma City. I'm listening to what you're saying, but you're simply saying to us that it's going to be voted down.
No, not at all.
That seemed like what you were indicating to us, and we don't want that to happen.
That's not at all?
Yeah.
That is not at all what I'm saying to you. I'm just saying that potentially, and the chairman can speak to this, is that whatever the motion is from one of the planning commissioners, whether it's to approve or deny, you still have to have, the applicant has to have 5 votes one way or the other. Maybe you can elaborate, John.
Yeah,
All right.
The policy is that in order for the Planning Commission to take action, a majority of the commissioners must vote one way or another, either in favor of a motion or in denial of a motion. If we wind up with a vote of 2 to 4 here today, then there are 2 choices. One is that that would provide an automatic continuance. The other is that we could make a decision as a commission to forward the item to the City Council without a recommendation, which would mean it wouldn't be heard here again. The decision would be made at City Council. And they will make the ultimate decision anyway because we're a recommending body to them.
Okay.
So the comments that you've heard do not suggest at all what the commissioners might do in terms of how they might act in terms of voting on this matter.
All right.
There's no decision is made. At some point, we're going to have to make a decision on whether we have the continuance. I'll take you, and then Major Jemison, and then we have to make a decision here.
Rosia McKinney Foster. I live in Wildwood, but my only grandchild is just blocks away from Cedar Ridge. It sounds as though one of your options, if you all don't vote 5 to go one way or the other, would be to move it on to the City Council, who's going to have to hear it anyway. I say let's go with it today, do what you're going to do, and then let us know where you stand, and then give it to the council. Then we can come back one time instead of having to come back here and then come back to the council, because I'm one of those that have taken annual leave for this.
That's Commissioner Gale's point exactly. Thank you very much.
I'm Dr. M.L. Jemison, Senior Pastor at St. John Missionary Baptist Church, and I believe Attorney Foster echoed my sentiments as well. What is it that prohibits these citizens just from being heard is my question.
Thank you. Commissioners, a motion?
I make a motion that we hear the application. And if we could move the order up, move the application forward so Jim can be here.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to continue, or to hear item 22 today. Cast your votes. It will be heard today. What I'm going to do is because we have several items that I think will not take a lot of time, I'm going to try and get some of those behind us before we pick up on item 22. At this point, we have time. So to the consent docket.
Consent, we have 6 items. C 6606, C 6607. Do I need to read these? C 6606 is the final plat of Williamson Farms Edition, Section 7, located west of Meridian Avenue and south of Southwest 119th. Item 2 is C 6607, the final plat of The Grove, Phase 7, located east of May and south of Northwest 192nd. Item 3 is C 6605, the revised final plat of Brookstone Lakes West, Phase 3, located west of Sarah Road and south of Southwest 29th Street. Item 4 is PC 10375 to rezone 4606 South MacArthur from R1 to I2. Item 5 is ABC 809, overlaying the PUD 62A located at 23090 West Memorial. And item 6 is PUD 1515A for a specific plan for PUD 1515 located at 13121 Northwestern.
Is there anyone here today who came to talk to us about items 1 through 6 on the agenda?
Chairman, I move the consent. I would also note that in the agenda, the address on number 5 that was just read is incorrect. It's really in the 2300 block rather than
23,000?
23,000 block.
Okay. Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the consent docket. Cast your votes. And that's approved.
Items requiring separate vote. We're on item number 7, DA 24060, for a lot split deed approval on property located at 13547 and 13549 Borgata Lane.
Good afternoon. I'm Kendall Dillon, representing the applicant, and this is simply just a lot split. If you'll notice on your map, there's a common area that provides access into common area A, and we would like to take a 7-foot sliver of property and deed that to lot 16 in order to build a little bit wider house on that lot. So that's the purpose of the request. I'm going to ask for approval.
No one signed up, Commissioners.
Where's the access to the common area?
It's the same common area that you see, common area A, on that map that connects to Borgata Lane. That is the access to the common area.
That space in between?
Right. And like I say, it was, I can't remember exactly, some 30 feet wide, so we'll still be somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 feet, 23.
Yeah, you just asking for 7 feet of it.
Right, just a small strip.
Yeah. Kendall, the developer is in agreement with this?
Actually, it's for his personal house, so yes.
Move approval.
Second. We have a motion and a second to approve item 7. Cast your votes. That's approved. Thank you.
Item 8 is C 6608, the revised final plat of Braxton, Section 1, located north of Reno Avenue and east of Frisco Road.
Again, for the record, Kendall Dillon, McCraft and Tull. This is a revised final plat in which you all previously approved a final plat on this piece of property. As far as the changes, the street alignment, everything is identical. It's exactly the same. The approved preliminary plat had basically 8,500 square foot lots. Our first section, we come in with really large lots to the tune of about 12,000 square feet, and since then, my client has decided that he thinks he needs to scale that back some, so we've reduced our lot size back to about 10,000 square foot on average. So we've made them a little bit smaller. That's the purpose of the revised final plat. Everything else is the same. So, and we are asking, again, it was the same variance that you all granted us with the first final plat, but on TE number 3, we've got the offset. It's 110 by code. It's 105 is what we have. I'll spare you the details unless you'd like them.
No one signed up.
Move approval of the variance.
Second. We have a motion and a second to approve the variance to TE3. Cast your votes. That's approved.
Move approval of the application.
We have a motion and a second to approve item 8. Cast your votes. That's
Thank
approved.
you.
Item 9 is PC 10373 to rezone 19800 North May Avenue from R1 to R1 ZL District.
Good afternoon, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant. Chris Anderson with SMC is also here with me. Our application is to rezone a portion of this to R1ZL. That's consistent with what is to the east. This will connect to the south with the R1 and to the east to the R1ZL. Staff has recommended approval, and we'd ask for the same. Here to answer any questions.
No one signed up, Commissioners? We have a motion and a second to approve item 9. Cast your votes. That's approved.
Thank you.
Item 10 is PC 10372 to rezone 1404 Southeast 20th Street from R1 to I-2 Modern Industrial District.
Darren Snow, 539 West Pawnee Courtway, Mustang, Oklahoma. I'm here on behalf of the owner to try to get this approved to change from R1 to I-2.
Okay, Commissioners, no?
I just have one quick question.
Go ahead.
On the property that you want rezoning,
Yes.
are you planning on building a building on it or what?
The building that is actually on the property to the west, we just want to extend it about 40 feet.
Okay.
We're not a new building, just extending the old one.
Okay, thank you.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve item 10. Cast your votes. That's approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 11 is C6601 preliminary plat of Prestige Park located west of May and south of Northwest 150th Street.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Dwight Butler with Anchor Engineering on behalf of the applicant. I have reviewed and agree with all the TEs and would respectfully request your approval.
No one has signed up, Commissioners. Second. We have a motion and a second to approve item 11. Cast your votes, and it's approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Item 12 is continued and item 13 is withdrawn. Item 14 is C6576, final plat of Spencerville, located north of Northeast 122nd and west of Air Depot.
Once again, for the record, Dwight Butler with Anchor Engineering on behalf of the applicant. If you'll recall, we had this before the last commission meeting, and we needed to get with traffic to make sure there was no way we could get access from 122nd, and nothing has changed at this time.
You say nothing's changed at this time. Has traffic looked at, and can they tell us if we grant a variance on this, what the impact would be?
I have spoken directly with Stuart Chai, the head of traffic department, and his opinion and mine both is that it would be very dangerous to try to access this point from the top of that hill. But I'll let Stuart speak for himself, obviously.
I just, guys are the professionals. I'm troubled somewhat by Hunter Drive being where it is, which is in very close proximity to Lot 1 of your plat.
Yes, sir.
And that small distance difference makes that much difference in safety?
Yes, sir.
That's all I need to know. Thank you.
Stuart's standing here if you want to talk to him, and I went out and looked at this site yesterday. I guess I missed Stuart by a couple hours, but even Hunter Drive doesn't meet site distance requirements.
That's where I was going with it.
But it's the least bad choice. So, Stuart, if you want to
That's
weigh
right,
in.
yeah. Due to the lay of the land along Northeast 122nd Street, and based on the 45-mile-an-hour speed limit, Hunter Drive would meet site distance requirements based on a 40-mile-an-hour limit. But from Hunter Drive on to the east, all the way out to Air Depot, you're not going to find any location that will pass site distance at a speed higher than 30.
Well, Stuart, that's my problem. I, too, went out and looked at it. Get out of your car and walk up there. You can really see the impact. And my question is, to me, Hunter Drive looked a little dicey, okay?
I didn't feel really good pulling out on 122nd Street from Hunter Drive myself, looking to the east.
Well, that's my point, Mr. Chairman. Now, if we approve this the way it's drawn, we basically double the traffic on Hunter Drive. And if it's that bad, I'm wondering whether this should go forward.
An application to amend the speed limit on 122nd Street downward to something like 40 would make Hunter Drive pass sight distance
Well,
requirements.
and perhaps that's where I'm going. Perhaps we are a little ahead of ourselves with approval of this plat until this limit is lowered.
Well, it doesn't...
Because it appears to me we're creating, if we have a problem with the access to this plat, which obviously we do, we're just doubling the problem on Hunter Drive, which doesn't seem prudent.
Could we make that a requirement that lowering the speed limit would be approved contingent on lowering the speed limit to 40?
Not really, no. They'd have to go to the Traffic Commission first, I think, and get their speed limit reduced.
Okay.
Then I would be happy to continue this until such time as I can get with Stewart and the Traffic Commission and see if we can get the speed limit lowered to 40 mile an hour.
That'd be good.
Safety first, yes.
I'd be comfortable with that.
Stewart, any estimate on how much time that would take to go before Traffic Commission?
Depends on when you get your application in. At this point in time, you'd probably, we have to have time to conduct a full site distance review, and we have to do a speed limit study on that road. And it may be, depending on what the posted limits are elsewhere on 122nd Street, we might wind up with a broader application, because if we were just to, if the rest of 122nd Street is posted 45, it's unlikely that we would want to support necessarily a single mile lowered to 40 miles an hour. So, July probably, but...
Well, you want to go indefinite?
You want to go indefinite?
Come back?
Yes, sir. That would be fine.
I move we continue this item indefinite to give them a chance to check into the speed reduction.
We have a motion and a second for an indefinite continuance on item 14. Cast your votes. And that's approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Item 15 is CE 879 to close a portion of Southeast 27th Street between South Phillips Avenue and South High Avenue.
Do you have the presentation we submitted?
We have it in our packet.
You have it in front of you? Okay, perfect.
So I don't want to take time to run it up there. If we can just talk about it quickly.
Fair enough. Webster Madole, 845 Southeast 29th Street.
Thank you.
Wanted to propose to you today, but tell you 1 or 2 minutes about Cameron, Oklahoma City Valves and Measurements, which is where this proposal is coming from. We operate at that location. We've been in Oklahoma City since 1946. Committed community partner, and we currently operate with a little over 400 employees, about 420. Our annual sales are around $450 million, and many of our suppliers and customers are throughout Oklahoma City. Additionally, very committed to our community. We work extensively with Lee Elementary, who's just down the street from us. We mentor to them. We provide school supplies for them. We've done a lot for the neighborhood in terms of trying to upgrade and revitalize that area. And we have a proposal in that vein that we think is a good fit and an improvement. Taking a look at page 2 on the packet that you guys have, shows you a little bit, yes, up there, shows you kind of current state. So our 4 borders are High Street on the east, Phillips on the west, 29th and 27th. We operate 100% between High and Phillips on 27th Street, both north and south. In bordering on the south side of 27th is our larger parking lot. You can see on the west is where our employees enter, and on the north of that parking lot is where they exit. We looked at this proposal and identified 2 things. The first is that street in 27th between High and Phillips does not have very much traffic on it. We have surveillance cameras on there, and we studied for 3 days and found that about 10 cars on average travel that route that are non-Cameron employees, 5 about each direction. I think one of the concerns that have been raised last time is that from Phillips to High, with our proposal of closing 27th Street, that would be a concern, but only about 5 cars per hour would be impacted. So we felt like that was a minimal amount that would not have a big impact on the neighborhood. The second thing we found is our traffic. Being that we operate 100% on both sides of the street, we make over 60 trips per day, primarily by forklift or material handling equipment, but also on foot. And we believe that frequency that's done throughout the day, night and day, does present a safety issue, both to the neighbors of Cameron as well as our own employees. We've had a number of near misses. In terms of carrying a load across the street, it does provide blind spots, as well as the truck traffic, car traffic, things like that. We feel like there's a lot of risk. We've been fortunate that we haven't had an actual event, but quite a few near misses as we talk to our employees. And then the next slide looks at the proposal. As you take a look at what we're proposing closing 27th Street. We believe this makes sense because of the minimal traffic that is already on it based on our video surveillance. And we do believe it offers a very good safety benefit to the neighbors as well as to the employees of Cameron. Again, the 60 trips is throughout the day, both day and night. And as we looked at this and making sure that we didn't feel like it was a lose situation for anyone, we didn't have any objections from our neighbors. We didn't have any objections from traffic and safety. When we kind of confirmed it with the low travel on the road itself and the high traffic that we have, we felt like it was a reasonable proposal. The last slide will show you just a bird's eye view blowing it back out. You'll see that 27th Street, which is colored in yellow, it's kind of landlocked, and so access to I-35 is not really changed by this proposal. If you're going to go to I-35 North, you're going to take 25th Street, where you just go up straight to 25th. If you're going to go to I-35 South, you're going to go to 29th Street and head down 29th. If you need access to High from Phillips, you could simply go up one block to 26th Street. It's a nice road, not a lot of concerns there. You can easily get over to High. And if you want to have an additional access outside of Phillips to 29th, you can go one block west to Lindsay. So we believe this is a good proposal from a safety perspective, and will help both the neighbors as well as Cameron.
Let me raise one question with you. It's an issue raised by our traffic staff, and it has to do with a view obstruction at Southeast 26th Street, and apparently where it intersects, I guess, with High, and there is a monument sign that's not used there with a concrete base that's a site obstruction. And if that were to be removed, the traffic division wouldn't have any problem with what you're proposing. But for people moving in and out of that intersection now, they cannot see oncoming traffic.
Okay.
Would you consider removing that as a part of our approval today?
The obstructions on 26th Street?
And High. Here's a picture of it if you'd like to come get it.
Yeah, that'd be great.
That sign's about a block and a half north of their property.
Pardon me?
The sign's not on their property.
Oh.
It's about a block and a half north.
Well, how do we remove it then? We can't make it.
He could ask his neighbor nicely. But
Oh, okay. I thought Stuart was trying to make that a condition of this, is how I read it.
Yeah, it surprised me because this was not on our property, so...
Forgive our misunderstanding of what we were being told here.
No problem at all. And I've driven that a number of times, and I'm not saying it's not an issue, but it hasn't been something that presented me, because I drove this a number of times to make sure that we were proposing something that was well-researched.
No one signed up, Commissioners. Comments and questions?
I have a comment, just for a second. I mean, actually, there's an observation and a comment, is that when I got the email on the sign that it's not on your property, this is an indication of why we need a sign ordinance to remove dilapidated, abandoned signs. For the purposes of sight distance and everything else, that's an obstruction, and it should be gone. So first. Okay. Second, you say you're closing off Southeast 27th Street. On the west side, is that road completely closed? What's the Phillips? Is it cut off?
No. And the reason for that is, as we would put a gate there, but as we went back and looked at the traffic flow in between the last meeting and this, we observed that the traffic flow dispersed in many different directions, and that traffic backs up currently on High Street, and we would be directing 100% of our traffic to High Street. And we didn't feel like that was a good proposal because we would be backing up High for anyone that wanted to come and take High from the north. And so we felt like by observing the traffic patterns that allowing the traffic to disperse as it does today was the best fit in terms of traffic flow.
So the closing off of the street is closing it off to the neighbors to the west, but not to you guys, that you can still send trucks, et cetera, up and down Phillips if you want to.
Our truck traffic predominantly enters and will continue to enter on, if you look at the graph, if you've got page 2 or page 3, where it says shipping and receiving, our truck traffic predominantly comes off of 29th Street to Phillips and enters there. And in any proposal, that wouldn't change. We do have truck traffic that does enter on 27th Street, where the arrow is in the middle, but that truck traffic comes off High Street, and that would continue to be the case.
But the point is that the closing off the street, you're not closing it. You're using this public street for your own benefit even though they're under a protest, or you say that there's support from the neighbors. If you close the thing off, well, that means that all of your business is hermetically sealed to the neighborhood to the west, and that's what I thought the proposal was going to be. It just eliminates any kind of opportunity for a semi to go up and down Phillips. That's my first observation. Secondly, there was some report in the last application that a left turn off of Phillips onto Southeast 29th is virtually impossible.
Yeah.
That needs to be fixed.
Sure. To address your statements, there's not a tremendous amount of truck traffic that goes from 27th up to Phillips. Our truck traffic, very highest percentage of it comes off 29th, comes onto Phillips, and then enters where it says shipping and receiving. Naturally, that's where
but that's my point, is that it enters south of 27th.
Yes. It does not go on 27th, so there would be no change there in any proposal. So
that would be the same.
Correct. And your second comment, in terms of 29th, I take that turn every single day. I've done it for 7 years. I would not say that it is a blind turn. I would not say that it's a dangerous turn. I would say that it's an adequate turn that's not blind. You have plenty of room to see on 29th, and that, again, the traffic disperses, and about half the people choose to take High, about half the people take Phillips, and it allows people to exit and enter, whether they're from the neighborhood or from Cameron, in an expeditious fashion. But in my time there, in the 7 years I've been there, we've never had a wreck on that corner. We haven't had an issue, and our 400 employees access it every single day.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to point out a couple of things. Some of the things that kind of concern me with this application is, one, is the congestion at the stoplight at High and 29th Street. There's already a lot of congestion there. And what we're doing is, right now we have only 28th Street that dead ends into Phillips. So now we're getting ready to create both 28th and 29th, 28th and 27th going to dead end if you close off 27th. So now we've got 2 streets dead end. If you come in south on I-35, the exit is at 25th Street, Southeast 25th Street.
Correct.
So if someone come down 25th Street and was trying to look for address on 28th or 27th, if they would come down High, then they would have to always come to 29th, so it would make it harder for them to access it. Mm-hmm. It would make it harder for the emergency vehicles to find 29th or 27th or 28th. And then in the previous application, we were going to close off 27th totally. But now we're going to also allow the employees to go to Phillips. So now the employees are going to go to Phillips, go to 26th, come back High to 29th Street, and then the residents will be doing the same thing. So we're still mixing more traffic. You're putting more traffic over on Phillips without giving any relief that they could go down 27th. And then, two, your parking lot at the corner of 29th and Phillips, it also have an exit and entrance onto Phillips. So you're continuing to impact Phillips Street, and I think it's more impact where cutting off 27th Street so we could have some relief to go through there.
Sure. I just to reply to those, in terms of access to Phillips Street, because, as to your point, 25th and 29th are the entrance and exit from I-35. Given that Cameron operates 100% on 27th Street, both north and south, individuals would take 25th Street down to Phillips or take 29th Street down to Phillips. I don't see a lot of people turning on High Street to have to turn again and to go through Cameron. They're going to take the most direct route, which I believe would be 25th, because that's the direct route right from I-35. In terms of the individual parking, again, I don't believe there's going to be any change there. The front parking lot, being the one close to 29th Street, that's not going to change in any proposal, whether or not we keep status quo or we make this change. That traffic has continued to flow there. We made that exit off of Phillips because it's the one available to us. It used to come off 29th Street years ago, and that wasn't safe, so we moved it to Phillips. Just to remind the commission, no one objected to this, and we actually went out and talked to a couple neighbors about this, and they didn't object to this. We've talked to them over the years. We have a relationship with them as we've worked to beautify the campus and reinvigorate that area, which is, in a number of cases, has gone downhill, and we've worked hard to correct that. We wouldn't be proposing something that had a lot of objections. I don't believe we'd be here today.
I think you really have beautified and done a great job with your building. But when I started looking at the case, I still look at the give and the take from the community.
Sure.
27th Street is a public street.
Sure.
So either make it private or public. But what you're basically saying now, because last week you were totally closing off at 27th and Phillips. Mm-hmm. But now you're selectively using it to exit onto it. So you're using the public street for your own, I'm not making a strong case for that, but you still will not allow the public coming from the west to go on 27, but you can go on to Phillips.
Correct.
From 27. So it's still impacting it more, because people coming out of 27 now, they have a choice. They either, if we close it off, they want to either go to 26 or they have to come back to 29th. Mm-hmm. And you're still making use of it, so it's not any relief on Phillips at all.
Correct, but my counterpoint would be, and I understand exactly what you're saying, and honestly, that was our initial proposal. But as we went and collected a lot more data for today's meeting, and we identified a number of things, we looked at the surveillance cameras around the clock and things like that, and we were able to get our data that suggested, minimal traffic is on here. So we feel we're going to be impacting minimal people. You're talking about 5 people an hour. I mean, that's less than 1 every 10 minutes. So it's very minimal traffic. I believe they've already found alternate routes because we operate on both sides, and we would like to protect everybody else from the huge safety issue that lurks in terms of a forklift getting hit or worse off, a pedestrian. And it could be a very severe accident at that point. We're over there 60 times a day, 60 plus actually, and that's just counting forklift traffic, not pedestrian traffic, which is in addition to that from our building. So most cars have already found an alternate route, and I think they're avoiding those risks and have not had any objections. But when we went back and looked at the data, it suggested that a better proposal was to keep that access available, so you did have good flow of traffic. And again, the neighbors weren't objecting to that, and we don't see it back up. I think if you did that and approved it with the closing, you're going to move the problem to High Street, and you're going to have High Street backed up 30 cars, and you'd have a separate problem. We didn't want to create a separate problem, so we did that consciously.
Yeah, and I think that's what you were saying. If you closed off 27th and you encouraged all your traffic to go from 27th to High, then with the problem with the light on 29th and High, it's going to back the traffic all the way up to 26th or maybe 25th Street. So he was asking for relief. And by your own words, you say only 5 cars per hour is coming through 27th? Well, it's not a whole direction. Yeah, each direction, but you said 5 cars, so I thought it was more traffic. I thought we had a lot of traffic going through that would impact.
The reason you thought that, James, was when we heard this case before, the case was based on 2 things. The high volume of traffic on 27th was a safety concern crossing the street, and there was a high volume of traffic. Now it's minimal and 5 an hour. The other part of the well-thought-out application we saw 2 weeks ago was that there would be absolutely no way people could exit the north parking lot and come back down Phillips. Now we've changed that. My suggestion to you, sir, is if there are only 5 cars per hour on that street, and you feel like there's a safety problem, perhaps you should put a flagman out there when you're crossing the street. And if you're crossing the street continually, maybe you need a flagman there all day. But this just doesn't look like it works to me.
Well, I'm hearing that there's a possible 2 out of 6 or 3 out of 6 that are not prepared to go forward today, that you're going to sit down and rethink this a little bit and come back but take a continuance, or you may get a denial. I don't know. I'm just trying to read the tea leaves here. So, Commissioners, do you have a preference?
I suggest that you perhaps continue this and put a little, just listen to what we're saying about the closure of that street that's now going to be closed. And Commissioner Gale's point is exactly mine. The volume of traffic created a very serious problem for your employees, et cetera.
I'm going to skip them.
5 cars an hour, that's not a problem. But at any rate, I would suggest, because that you come back at the first meeting in June, when there'll be more commissioners here to hear you fully, to hear the application fully. With 6 of us, it's a pretty...
Is that a motion?
Okay. What?
Is that a motion?
Yes. Move it to continue.
Is that acceptable with you?
June 12th.
It is.
Okay.
Okay. We have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to continue item 15 to June 12th. Cast your votes. We will now go to item 22.
Okay, item 22, SP 465, to operate a transitional mental health residential facility in the AA district located at 6505 Northeast 50th Street.
Good afternoon, David Box, here on behalf of the applicant. I also have several people here with me today that I'd like to introduce that will be speaking when I am through. I have Kevin Finley, who's the CEO of Cedar Ridge. I've got Gail Caldwell, who's the Director of Business Development for Cedar Ridge. I've got Miss Carrie Slayton Hodges, who's the Deputy Commissioner of the Oklahoma Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Department. I have Craig Jones, who's the President of the Oklahoma Hospital Association. I have Karen Orsi, who's the Director of the Aging Coalition. I've got Tracy Cook, who's the Executive Director of the National Alliance on Mental Illness, Oklahoma. I've got Sarah Berry, who is a licensed behavioral health professional. Randy Tate, who's the Executive Director of NorthCare. And finally, Gene Williams, who is the Executive Director of the National Alliance on Mental Health, Edmond. So,
David, let me caution you right now. It's 2:20. We have Jim Allen here until 3:30. Everyone needs to keep their comments very brief and to the point, not repeat anything that's been said by anyone else previously. The same instruction goes for the people who are signed up to talk about the case who are not affiliated or didn't come with you today.
yeah,
You don't have a lot of time to get something accomplished here.
all of ours will offer something different, but they all go to the merits, and that's they're all very important parts of our application, and we feel that we need to be able to put it on to have a hearing on our application.
That's fine. Everybody's got 3 minutes.
Well, what we're here on today is a special permit number 465 for Cedar Ridge Hospital. And it's a piece of property that has a long history dating back to 1982 when mental health operations started at this site. Over the years since 1982, there's been a series of special permits that have expanded the operation. Fast forward to 2000, which was the last special permit that was granted by this commission. It allowed up to 116 beds, but it only allowed adolescents. In 2003, the predecessor in interest to from my company built a hospital building and moved in adults. My client purchased the property in 2007. At such time, there were already 36 beds that were being operated as an adult unit. It was not until last year, late last year, when Cedar Ridge went to expand to 140 beds that the city recognized that the special permit that was in place did not allow adults that had been there for the last decade. It's important to note that in 2003, when the predecessor did move the adults in, they didn't go through the special permit process through the city. There was a failure at that point. They did go through the correct licensing process for the state. It somehow fell through the cracks. And in 2007, it somehow fell through the cracks when my client acquired the property. It's unfortunate that it happened, but it did happen. But since then, the facility has been operating with adults. And I know several of you have toured the facility, and I think if you toured the facility, you would agree that the way that the facility is run is top-notch. It is a beautiful facility. It's run well. A lot of what you're going to hear today is how bad the parent company is. And I will tell you, and I believe your legal counsel will tell you, that that has absolutely zero legal relevance as to how you're going to vote on the special permit. If you vote on the merits of this special permit, we believe the only reasonable answer is approval. This has been operating since 1982 in some form or fashion, and it has helped thousands upon thousands of people. To deny this is not only a problem for Cedar Ridge, it is a catastrophic problem in the state of Oklahoma. We rank, I think, number 2 per capita in mental health illness. And to take 36 beds out of circulation will have a dramatic and drastic impact on the entire state of Oklahoma. I do think it's important to note some of the additional security measures that my client has been willing to do, regardless of the outcome of this special permit. We're going to install security fences around the residential area, and we're going to install the security fence at the adult building as well. We're going to install security cameras on the exterior of all the buildings to ensure that the safety concerns that are present are hopefully relieved. We're willing to implement a neighborhood meeting group quarterly. So far we haven't had any takers on that, but that's still something we're willing to do. We're going to institute more training and protocol procedure meetings for our staff to ensure that all the proper procedures and protocol are being followed to help ease some of those concerns. If there are no questions for me at this time, I will turn it over to our first speaker, which is Ms. Carrie Slayton-Hodges.
Give us your name and address for the record, please.
I am Carrie Slayton-Hodges, Deputy Commissioner for the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services, 1200 Northeast 13th Street, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to speak with you today. I just want to remind everybody that psychiatric disorders are diseases, just like any other diseases, and individuals need proper care and treatment. Unfortunately, in Oklahoma, as was mentioned, we're rated number 2 nationally for the percentage of individuals who suffer from psychiatric diseases. We have a great shortage of psychiatric beds in Oklahoma for those in need. It oftentimes falls to the state to supply those beds. What we have to do in order to come anywhere close to reaching the need is to partner with the private sector. When you have a fully state-operated bed, it is not able to bill other payer sources, so that's 100% state dollars. As you know, our state legislature has had a need to continue to cut dollars over the years. We've lost state beds for psychiatric disorders from that. We've had to rely heavily on our private sector. Unfortunately, although these diseases are every bit as important to treat, or I would even say the brain is more important to treat than other disorders, we find fewer takers to treat psychiatric disorders because the compensation for that is not the same as it is, say, for cancer or bone disorders. So we very much value our private sector partners. In Oklahoma County, we have continued to lose some of those private sector partners. If you'll remember recently, about 3 years ago, OU closed their psychiatric beds. They had 16 beds in the center of the city, which was really problematic. I do want to make sure that I mention one of the other hardships that we have, not only for family members or people in need of treatment when we don't have the adequate number of beds for those, that leads to many consequences. As you know, it can lead to homelessness, it can lead to families dissolving, it can lead to children in child welfare custody. But one of the essential problems that happens in the city is it takes law enforcement officers off of the street. Because for a person who is placed in custody because they may be a danger to themselves, a law enforcement officer, oftentimes too, is required to transport that person. In fiscal year 13, mental health transports out of Oklahoma County, there were 510 of those. And I'll remind you that that was when the Deaconess beds were in operation. Those are out of operation now. This number is liable to be up by a third this fiscal year. 510 trips, totaling 48,203 miles outside of Oklahoma County. That's how far people had to go to get care for their mental health disorders. That's how far their family had to go to support them. And that was the cost to law enforcement officers that were not on the street, and also the time that they paid those law enforcement officials to transport those individuals. So what I would say is that we have a great partnership with this entity that we're visiting about today. They've done a great job of operating these adult beds out in this region. We, from a psychiatric perspective, we must continue to see these beds here. It would be a tremendous loss to Oklahoma County. It would be more people driving long ways away. Northwest Center for Behavioral Health up in Woodward is one of the places. The average trip when someone goes out is 104 miles.
Okay.
So I would ask you to please support this certificate to continue to operate these adult beds.
Let me ask you one question before you sit down. You say we have a shortage of beds. Do we have a shortage of beds for youth as well as adults?
It is much more so for adults. One of the reasons that there is less of a shortage of youth beds is because youth are more likely to have a payer source than adults, and so more people stay in that business. Adults, we have a high percentage of uninsured. It's a higher risk to run an adult operation, and so not as many people are apt to get in that business.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, but following up on that question, I get it, there's a shortage of beds.
Yes.
And right now, Cedar Ridge is doing 36 adult beds, if I understand it.
Yes.
That said, if they weren't doing those 36 adult beds, that would be 36 fewer adults. But is there still a shortage of juvenile beds?
We have had times in the last year where there was not an available juvenile bed in the state.
So with all your consortium, all these people, and David went down the list of everyone who's going to speak.
Yes.
Can't you coordinate to reposition the 36 adults here somewhere else and bring these people 36 kids?
What I would say is, although there have been times in the last year when we were unable to find a juvenile bed, there are times every week in the state that we are unable to find an adult bed. The need is so much more greater for adult beds.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, my name is Craig Jones. I am president of the Oklahoma Hospital Association at 4000 Lincoln Boulevard here in Oklahoma City. Carrie has outlined for you the first part of what I would have said is there's a tremendous need in Oklahoma, let alone across the country. And I just wanted you to know that from the standpoint of the Oklahoma Hospital Association, we represent over 130 hospitals across the state. And in the area of behavioral health, there is a great deal of cross-transportation, as you heard from Carrie, that where there are areas of the state that are insufficient in terms of the supply of behavioral health beds, that other areas of the state step up. And that is true with the Cedar Ridge facility. I also am here representing the Greater Oklahoma City Hospital Council, which represents all of the major hospitals in the metropolitan area. And 6 of those hospitals are very much in support of this application. They recognize the need that Carrie outlined, and clearly there is a severe need for these kinds of services. I also want to point out to you that in the whole time that Cedar Ridge has been operating this facility, and even the facility before that, I have been working at the Oklahoma Hospital Association, and I'm not aware of any major complaints at all that have ever come from this, from the community or the facility about problems with its operations. I'm not aware of, but let's just assume that there are some issues with the parent company, but yet on a local basis, basically what transpires in the success of any organization is going to be its leadership. And I can attest to you that the leaders and the people who are involved with Cedar Ridge are extremely committed to the work that they do. They're extremely committed to their communities. And that's the final point that I want to rest on. When we look to the future with healthcare, the success of moving our healthcare system forward is going to be the partnerships that develop between healthcare providers and their communities. It is a critical element that we engage that. And it seems to me, I know that there is a commitment on the part of the leadership to work with this neighborhood, to work with this community. You've already heard some things that they want to address, and I think this is an excellent opportunity to take them at their word and to explore how can we continue to foster an effective working relationship between the needs that the state has, the needs that this metropolitan community has, as well as the concerns that the public has. That's going to be the marchword going forward. It is not unique to this community, and I urge your support to allow this to go forward and allow them to coordinate, partner for the best needs of the people in Oklahoma that need the care.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to address you. My name is Karen Orsi. I'm the director of the Oklahoma Mental Health and Aging Coalition, which is a statewide alliance, 4436 Northwest 50th in Oklahoma City. I'm a mental health advocate. I support Cedar Ridge's application, but I'm here specifically to talk about the geriatric population. Older adults are very much underserved, and I'd like to just paint a picture for you briefly of the person that you're going to be turning away from the bed, the very necessary bed. Perhaps it's your mother, your father, a favorite aunt, a grandmother, or grandfather that is perhaps suffering some cognitive decline for the first time in their lives. They are dealing with depression. They may have pulmonary artery disease plus diabetes and arthritis, and they may be needing this kind of attention. These folks cannot be turned away, and we make the choice of giving them the treatment to support older Oklahomans, or we can support the idea of them being placed in a different facility because they do not get the treatment that they need. And that loss is not only a loss for that person's independence, but for their families, their grandchildren, their neighborhood, the entire community. So I urge you to think about the older adult population, which will be very much hurt if these beds are closed. Thank you very much.
Thank
Questions?
you.
Thank you.
My name is Tracy Cook with the National Alliance on Mental Illness here in Oklahoma. I'm also a constituent of Ward 3 here in Oklahoma City. My address is 4200 Perimeter Center Drive, Suite 150, Oklahoma City. What I want to address today is what's happened in our office here in Oklahoma City after Deaconess closed 57 beds, including geriatric beds. They were all adult beds, and our increase in calls has gone up by 20%, just in families telling us that they've been told there is no adult bed in the state. They have to drive 8 hours or longer to get somewhere. A lot of time it is not even in the state of Oklahoma. They must leave the state to get care. It's very difficult, just as Commissioner Slatton-Hodges mentioned. The other thing I want to tell you is what research says about losing psych beds. The national recommendations for how many psych beds we should have in a state is 50 per 100,000 in population. Right now, we are in Oklahoma at 11 per 100,000 population. We're not even close. We're actually what's called a critical bed shortage state. So we're already at that level. What happens when you close beds in a neighborhood, in your community, in your city, and in your state? Increased homelessness, emergency room overcrowding, increased use of jails and prisons as psychiatric hospitals, increased time that local police and county sheriffs must transport, just as Ms. Slatton-Hodges mentioned. We also have an increase in number in our Oklahoma City Police. We work very closely with the Oklahoma City Police Crisis Intervention Team at NAMI, and they report numbers to us how many people were transported to each of our Oklahoma City area facilities. Cedar Ridge had 40 in April. We don't have May numbers yet, but in April they had 40 people transported by the Oklahoma City Police Department to their facility. That doesn't count the Sheriff's Department and other police from surrounding areas that also transported people to Cedar Ridge. That's a 230% increase from their average last year of 17 transports a month. The last thing I want to talk to you about is violence. I think people get worried about, they hear the word mental illness, we see it on television, we hear about shootings and horrific events. But another thing that the research tells us and that we know is that no more likely are people that have mental illness going to commit a crime, violent crime, than anyone else in the neighborhood or in your state. They're actually less likely. They're more likely to be victims, though, of crime and violence. Primarily physical care hospitals such as St. Anthony's, Integris, Midwest Regional, they have psych units just like Cedar Ridge. But neighbors don't complain because there's nothing to complain about. We don't get complaints about those things, and we take a lot of complaints in our office. But I will tell you, we don't get complaints about the neighbors and neighborhoods surrounding these facilities. The other thing I want you to know is that Cedar Ridge is not only very good at what they do, they are better than many others because all they do is psychiatric care. Thank you very much.
You mentioned, ma'am?
Yes.
You mentioned the closing of all the beds, and you went down the OU and Deaconess and all that.
Yes.
And then you tell us about the extreme shortage that we need 50, we're at 11. So with that tremendous need, why are these organizations closing their bed?
What I got from Deaconess, and I wasn't in my position when OU closed several years ago, it's not lucrative. Just as Commissioner Slatton Hodges said, there's not a payer source many times for our adults. It's not a lucrative business.
That's my whole point here. If we're so, as a community, we have such a critical shortage, which obviously we do, no one wants to address it because of the money. They can't make the buck, and so they turn their back on these people. Opening room for private care. But we're a long way from 11 to 50.
I think what we have to realize as well is that this is not a neighborhood issue. This is not an Oklahoma City, and I live in Oklahoma City. This is my home. It's not an Oklahoma City issue. This is a state issue. It is critical that we keep all the beds that we can, and we actually continue to build more beds, open more beds, and try to convince people to serve those and do the right thing in our community.
Thank you.
I'm Randy Tate. I'm Chief Executive Officer for North Care Center. North Care is one of the very few safety net providers for community-based care in Oklahoma County. That means that all of our services are provided to ensure that the folks without insurance or means to pay for services get them, although our services are all outpatient services and not inpatient. And I will tell you that we have been reduced numerous times over the last decade in funding from the state legislature to take care of the community-based needs, and we do not have the resources to take on additional bed closings in Oklahoma County at the community safety net level. North Care operates one program called a mobile crisis team, and we are charged with responding to individuals in crisis who may need inpatient care and are at that level of acuity. And there are times that our staff cannot locate a bed anywhere in the state. And we do not have the resources in an outpatient environment to safely secure our staff and the needs of those patients with the reduced beds. So that was the premise in which I come.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jean Williams. I am a volunteer of the National Alliance on Mental Illness, the Edmond North OKC affiliate. My address is 3316 Meadowview Road, Edmond, Oklahoma, 73013. I'm here to represent families. I could give you a stack of statistics that substantiate everything that's already been said. But what that translates into in personal stories is how bad it has to be to get a bed. Whether you have insurance or you don't have insurance. I know families every day that their loved one gets turned away from help. I don't think if I told you the stories, you would believe me. My son was fortunate enough to get help from Cedar Ridge at a turning point. It took a lot of work to get him qualified to be there. You have to wait for the heart attack. It's worse than that. You have to have a heart attack and be bleeding and been run over by a truck all at once in order to get help. The standards are that high because we have a lack of beds. So I hate to think that a technicality could close beds. And it's our neighborhood, it's everyone's neighborhood. We need beds in everyone's neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Kevin Finley. I'm CEO of Cedar Ridge Hospital, and I've been with Cedar Ridge since 2010. And I'm going to keep my presentation brief in interest of time. You do have a copy of it. We won't go through the entire presentation, but I do want to tell you a few things about Cedar Ridge and about my career. I've been working in mental health since 1993 here in Oklahoma. I've worked for a large percentage of the mental health agencies, hospitals, private and public in this state. I'm not from Philadelphia, however, my company that I work for is. And I don't want to spend a whole lot of time talking about them. You may hear a lot today about them. But I will say that I've been in Oklahoma long enough to know how Oklahoma mental health works. And our system is in great need. That's why I've stayed here. I'm originally from Texas, but for the last 20-something years I've been here. I specialize in treatment of children, adolescents, adults, and geriatric. My career has been focused on helping people with mental illness. I have 2 different graduate degrees. I'm a licensed professional counselor, and I am an advocate for mental illness and for those that suffer from mental illness. There's a tremendous need in this state. I knew the property before I came to Cedar Ridge. I knew it as under a different owner. I knew how they operated at that time. When I had the opportunity to come to Cedar Ridge as the CEO, there were definite things that I wanted to see, and I wanted to see improved. We have significantly improved quality of care at Cedar Ridge during my tenure. I employ close to 250 employees. A large percentage of them live in the area, in the neighborhood. It is their job. They are advocates for those that suffer from mental illness. They come to work every day and want to see these people treated in a safe manner. We are concerned neighbors. We want to provide good quality care to our patients. We also want to be a good neighbor to those that live in the area. We want to make sure that our patients are safe. We want to make sure our staff are safe, and we want to make sure our neighbors are safe. As you've heard from other testimonies, those that suffer from mental illness are not likely to be violent and aggressive offenders, but they do need help. The disease definitely needs treatment. We do things, we operate, in my opinion, a very good hospital that has very high quality of care. That's evidenced by our accreditation through the Joint Commission. That's evidenced by our frequent regulatory audits from the State Department of Human Services and the State Department of Health, that we've had successful audits during my tenure. We always look at improving quality. And one of the things that we have said that we will do, and we are already moving forward with, is adding a fence. We think that will help, adding security cameras. But bottom line is, we're there to treat mental illness. The 36 beds we're talking about is not 36 people. It's about 2,000 people a year, not 36 people. That's how many admissions we have to those beds. we have had very few, in fact, lower than the national average incidents while treating these patients during my time here. And I continue to expect that we will move forward with high quality of care. And I do know that my employees are very concerned about this. They're concerned about their jobs, and closure of these beds will equal loss of jobs for these employees. And I don't want to see that, and I don't want to see, we certainly want to advocate for those with mental illness. We can't afford as a state to lose those beds, but also my employees can't afford the loss of jobs either. We want to be good partners. We will do whatever we have to do to be good partners with the community. But this is a technicality. It should have been caught upon acquisition. I can't speak for why it wasn't, but I can advocate for those that are involved at this point, and that's our state need for mental illness as well as my employees.
Thank you. In closing, I think it's important to look at the staff's technical evaluation. And if we look at the merits of the application based upon the comprehensive plan and the zoning code, staff recommends approval. And we would ask for the same based on the merits of this case. Here to answer any questions.
David, one question for you and your clients ponder while we're hearing from others. Oftentimes on special permits, we see a term on the permit. This one does not have a term. With this level of protest, and I'm not saying I want to go forward with it, I'm not saying we want to deny it, but I'm saying with this level of protest, obviously there's concern. So if we were to amend this to a 2-year term, I don't know if that'd make any difference to the protesters. I don't know if your client would be willing to do something like that, but I would suggest while the protesters are speaking, you might want to kick that around.
Yeah, well, while you hear from everyone else, I'll visit with my client. Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll hear from the people who have signed up to speak on this item. And again, I would remind you that time is short, at least for us to have 6 commissioners present. And Reverend Reed, you'll be first.
Let me first say good afternoon to all of the Planning Commission. I am Pastor John A. Reed Jr. of Fairview Baptist Church in Northeast Oklahoma City, and also president of 2 ministerial organizations of Northeast Oklahoma City, Concerned Clergy for Spiritual Renewal, and also the Baptist Ministers Association. And I am here today representing those 2 organizations, and we're here out of concern for the neighbors of Cedar Ridge. I also have some protest petitions to present. I have an additional 45 petitions containing 322 signatures to say no to special permit 465. And that brings the total number of signatures to approximately 660. Who do I present these to?
To our staff right here.
The lack of access to mental health care is a growing problem that we know in our community. It's an issue that has been far too long ignored. We see the results of our inaction through panhandles on our street corners. When I say that, I mean homeless people sleeping on our bridges, and the number of people with mental illness incarcerated in our penal system. But today is a good day to lay the foundation for our future of our community, for deciding what direction that Oklahoma City will take in allocating our limited mental health resources. And so you, the Planning Commission, is presented today with a unique opportunity, an opportunity to make a difference in the life of a young person trying to cope with mental illness, an opportunity to influence the path that Oklahoma City will take in distributing our mental health resources, an opportunity to set the direction as to where to become proactive by providing the tools our children and adolescents need to successfully function in our society. As they mature, as they become adults, are reactive by continuing to spend countless dollars later on in keeping them locked up in our correctional institutions when they become adults. According to a report by the Treatment Center, it says those with mental illness cost more while incarcerated, and they are more likely to return. And an article in the Date Oklahoma last Friday indicated that nearly 50% of inmates in Oklahoma prisons have a history of or are currently exhibiting symptoms of severe mental health. And I noticed that about 79% of female inmates and 46% of male inmates have been diagnosed with a mental illness problem, according to the state correction and mental health data. In the same article, Oklahoma County District Attorney David Prater indicated that he would like to see early interventions, and that's including service for children. He stated we should be proactive in the mental health and substance abuse area, investing in juvenile services, and is investing in the public safety of the state. And what he was saying is that those dollars spent would decrease what need to be spent in corrections later. If it is true that the purpose of SP 465 is for Cedar Ridge to come into compliance, then Cedar Ridge's definition of coming into compliance is somewhat different than mine. And when I think of complying, I think of changing one's behavior to conform to established laws and established rules and policies and procedure. But when I review the Oklahoma City planning staff comparison of Cedar Ridge's current special permit, which is 291, and when I compare the 291 with 465 now being requested, it become apparent to me that Cedar Ridge's intent is for the city to change its established laws, its established rules and procedures to conform to the way Cedar Ridge has been operating for the last 10 to 15 years. Really what's happening, Cedar Ridge wants this planning commission to bless their noncompliance. While it is true the city of Oklahoma City cannot tell Universal Health Service where to invest its resources, however, we can limit their resources by saying no to SP 465. Our community wants to become proactive by investing in our children and adolescents' mental health well-being. And we want to ensure the limited resources available in our community to meet the needs of our children and our adolescents, and they are not redistributed to our adult population. Yesterday, an article in Date Oklahoma indicated that UHS has taken over the 57 inpatient beds psychiatric clinic that's owned by Bethany. And the article quoted Mr. Finley saying that the University Health Service is going through state licensing process and hopes to reopen the Bethany Clinic in about 8 months. Now, those 57 inpatient psychiatric beds were for adult patients when Deaconess Hospital operated the facility. UHS can once again reserve those 57 inpatient beds for adults. Once more, we cannot tell UHS where to invest its resources, but we can limit their resources and their choices by saying no to SB 465.
Pastor Reed?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. We're kind of...
Can I make one other statement?
One more, sure. Thank you.
And I'll be through. We know that there's still a need for all of the 116 children and adolescent beds that are approved by under SP 291. And there's one thing we can be sure of. A no to SP 465 is a yes to the availability of more residential care beds for our children and for our adolescents. And what we're saying today, we're asking you to keep it that way.
Thank you. Richard Scroggins. While you're coming up, what I'll admonish is our municipal councilor confirms what Mr. Bach says, which is UHS's activities in places other than Oklahoma City and Cedar Ridge are not something we can take into account here today, although I know a lot of the history. So just if you give us your name and address.
My name is Richard Scroggins. My address is 5801 North Air Depot Boulevard in Oklahoma City. And I respect the position that you take and what your council provided you. But separating UHS from Cedar Ridge is like separating your eye from your body. It doesn't function. We know for a fact that Mr. Finley could make a statement to the press because Cedar Ridge told him no. Cedar Ridge is a multi-billion-dollar corporation that operates all over the country. UHS is, and Cedar Ridge can't make decisions without the corporate office approval. That fence that they talked about is waiting on corporate approval. So how can you look at one entity without taking the whole? We're business people here. When we do business, we go to buy a house, buy a car, we do everything else. We look at past performance. We want to know that after the handshake's done, the contract signed, that person standing behind us is there, that the word is good, that we can trust him. The only way we can be sure of Cedar Ridge's past future performance is look at that past history. They've got a history of noncompliance in every jurisdiction they've worked in. And right here with Cedar Ridge, they're out of compliance with 219. And I hear the stuff about, yeah, we didn't know when we purchased it. That company is traded on the New York Stock Exchange. They made in excess of $7 billion last year. I myself has got a background in government purchasing, and if we were to pull that thing that they said they pulled, somebody would be fired. They purchase hospitals all over the country. They're professionals. That's what they do. Body if you like, but I don't. And the thing about Cedar Ridge or UHS is credibility. Credibility is important when you're dealing with anyone. We need to know in our community that we can trust them. Thus far, that has proven not to be the case. At the community meeting that was held at Metrotech, the question was put to Cedar Ridge: have you or are you currently involved in any litigation where it's alleged that an adult raped a female patient there? Management selected or chose to say no. We know that was not true. How can we trust what they tell us if we can't trust what they tell us? How can we do business with them? We're not here to try to take away beds from adults. As it was already been stated, when the old Baptist facility opened up, or not Baptist, but the 57 beds become available, UHS got the authority to make those adult beds, so the need is met there. What we want to happen is for those beds that was approved in the 291 for youth to stay youth. We want to be proactive, as was already stated, but the intent to say we can't consider what they've done in the past, even our criminal justice system says 3 strikes you're out. Maybe that's the rules, but it doesn't fly in the face of common sense. Business people don't operate that way. You don't operate that way in your personal life. And we want you to bring that same bit of foresight, that same bit of wisdom when you're making a decision on this as you use personally. We demand that. We deserve that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anastasia Pittman.
Good afternoon, Planning Commission. I'm Anastasia Pittman, State Representative for Oklahoma City in House District 99, 2300 North Lincoln Boulevard. And I just want to stand with the residents today of this great community. They are upset. They're upset about the violations that Cedar Ridge Mental Facility has on the table. Local residents are urging you to vote no, vote against this special permit for UHS, and they're doing business as Cedar Ridge in the facility of Northeast Oklahoma City, which was originally designed for children and with mental health behaviors. Neighborhoods in the area are very supportive of keeping the facility open if it's for children. The neighbors do not want to admit adults. That violation has already been proven that adults are there without permission. And so the facility should remain dedicated to the children. The city has even acknowledged that Cedar Ridge is out of compliance. That's in black and white. Violations of their current permit, they lack security. So why don't we ask them to provide all the security measures and then come back and ask for the extension? Cedar Ridge has a record of multiple elopements, which means patients are leaving the facility without authorization. How does that happen if we're doing business in compliance? Several of these mental health patients have shown up on the doorsteps of the homes of these residents. Number 2, understaffing is a concern. It's been a prominent problem, and often the city, they've been cited in cases against UHS, not just in Oklahoma, but nationwide. Local residents suspect the lack of supervision of Cedar Ridge is also behind 2 pending, not 1, but 2 pending court cases of alleged sexual assaults of children by adults. How does that happen? So no one wants to talk about the safety of children. We failed them. We failed to use a proactive approach to address the next generation and their mental health needs. No one wants to review the number of violations that Cedar Ridge has. Well, I'm a member of the state legislature. I serve as the vice chair of Human Services. So let's talk about appropriations. The longer we advocate for lower taxes, the more we're going to have a shortfall annually. So if we don't have the money that we need to take care of these things, let me share what the Oklahoman said last month, what Commissioner Terry White said about mental health services. The Oklahoma Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services Commissioner says Oklahoma has the biggest problem in the nation and is struggling with these things that are treatable. But most unfortunate, and this is by Dr. Brent Bell, his quote is, "The most unfortunate part of Oklahoma's situation is how treatable the problem is. A child, an adolescent psychiatric doctor from St. Anthony Hospital says if left untreated, children with mental illness, often it contributes to smoking, addictions, heart disease, and lowering the overall health of the state. So a person without treatment might die 20 years younger. It just compounds good. Early treatment is proven to work." So let me share with you just a fact. Oklahoma spends $53 per capita on mental health treatment, while the nation spends $120 on average. So Commissioner White says she believes more funding will save taxpayer money in the long run. But that's if we invest in our youth. Because if they're not on track in 3rd grade for reading, we've got a bed for them for being delinquent. But when we house them, they become mental health patients. So we end up paying twice or 3 times to treat a problem that could have been solved in the beginning. So with that, I'd like to say that UHS has a public web history of non-compliance. It's almost in every jurisdiction in which they operate. So for the truth, if the Planning Commission so chooses to recommend the approval of SP 465, subject to the conditions as the installment of a security fence and a neighborhood alert system, which will tell local residents when someone has escaped or left without supervision. They're subject to the conditions of the installment of these things. We know from Cedar Ridge's compliances with SP 291 that UHS promises versus deliverable in other jurisdictions and the lack of enforcement right here in our own city, nothing's going to change. So a change in Cedar Ridge operation will only occur if the Planning Commission says no. So to prevent the underutilization or the overutilization of law enforcement, we've got to institute those security alerts. And we cannot track complaints when the organizations close at 5 o'clock and the occurrences happen at night. So with that, I say to you, I stand with the residents of Oklahoma City, the taxpayers of Oklahoma City, the voters of Oklahoma City, and we ask you to vote no on this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Elizabeth. Give us your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Elizabeth Lee Roth. I am one of the notified property owners of 120 acres. I do realize that some of the commissioners are on the fence with this. Some of you are trying to negotiate an equal, let's split the baby, trying to be fair and equal on both sides. I understand that, but we're not equal. On one hand, you have neighbors that have become fearful in their own developments, numerous developments, unable to enjoy their suburban property, their land, or enjoying our country life. We now have traffic from 300 employees, 3 shifts, that's 600 trips per day, 116 patients visiting, service trucks, outpatient services. We no longer have our quiet country roads that, by the way, are only 13 feet wide in places. We are now fearful when we come home to get out of our car and walk to our dream home that we work hard to pay for, being met again by police cars in our driveway. 2 sirens per week go down our streets with helicopters floating around. Our firearms are now close by. On the other hand of this equal split, we have an out-of-state corporation profiting off the backs of youth, turning their needs for beds to adults for profit while violating safety and security of children and staff and neighbors, violating the rules that you, the city, have set for the protection of the citizens for profit. And I disagree with the previous speaker. The profit is $10 million was made from Cedar Ridge in the year 2012. 10 million profit last year alone. We are not equal in this split situation. UHS is in violation. It is not our duty, is it not your duty as commissioners to uphold your provisions and to enforce your codes, your rules, your requirements that were issued from the original permit? Please do not allow this corporation to proceed while in violation of their current permit. Enforce compliance. Do not reward UHS for being in violation. UHS is not a Kimray. UHS has not reached out to our community. They do not add to our tax base. UHS has taken our lifestyle away from us, created a nuisance, used the city and neighborhood city services such as Forest Park has written you a letter. They have created this distrust, a distrust that has asked us to believe UHS, and again, the corporate 500 level company, I won't go into it because it has been covered, but I do not believe that this company would buy a property and not know what they're buying. Our neighborhood has had numerous healthcare facilities since 1982. Again, the only way I know how to appeal to you all is to deny 465, place an increase. It's called an intake freeze on adults. That is how other communities have dealt with the UHS problem. This is a track record. I didn't make this up. It's out there. Place an intake freeze on adults. Cedar Ridge has already said they're only there for 7 days, 7 to 8 days anyway. 30 days, this problem is done. We know they will come back and ask again for expansion. They've already received the expansion from the state. We know they're going to come back. We're ready for them to come back. All we're saying is do not reward bad behavior. That's part of mental health. Again, thank you for your time. One last thought. The tipping point for major change is often tragedy. A 13-year-old girl went in for depression. She was allegedly raped at Cedar Ridge. Is that not enough tragedy?
We've got quite a few more of you to speak. We would like to hear new information, and I'll just let you come up one at a time if you have something in addition to say that we've not already heard.
Mr. Chairman, while they're coming up, I am sympathetic to the fact that people don't like the parent corporation. You made a request, and the last 4 speakers have disrespected your request. The next time I hear about how bad UHS is, whether they're good, bad, or otherwise, I'm leaving this meeting. If one more person leaves this meeting with me, the quorum is broken, and we'll take this up another day. The chairman has asked you, and you've just flat been disrespectful. Every person has done something that you were admonished and asked not to do. What are you here for? You're here to be heard. Stick to the case at hand and respect the chair.
Sir, your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, James Henderson, 5421 Northeast 56th Street, Oklahoma City. I retired in 2002 and relocated to Oklahoma City to build my dream house in the Gregory facility. And I went through a lot of expense to build my beautiful home, and I had no intentions of moving across the street from a jail. And now I find myself in the environment of a jail. My family is afraid to go out and walk the street. My neighbors have had their cars broken into. There was no impact study on how they was going to impact the neighborhood as far as security or any other things. We had no idea that the adults was over there until recently. This has greatly affected my life and upset me and my entire family and my community. We realize that what's going on is not fair, My home value is probably losing value. I don't know what it's going to be in the future, but I'm very concerned on what it's doing to me personally. I understand that a business is here to make money, which I don't begrudge that, but not in my community where I have to weigh it on my back, where I have to suffer the loss for another company want to come and just take over our community. And I enjoy walking the hills at night, me and my family, enjoying the prestige, looking over Oklahoma City with all the lights at night. But now my wife's afraid to walk out because she's afraid of some acute person maybe walking in the neighborhood. And I don't think this is fair, and I stand with my community, and we want to have you to vote no on this proposal. Thank you.
I do have a question for you, sir, and that is just to make a point or understand, adults have been in that facility since, I think, 2004, 2003, somewhere in that range, and you've lived there how long in the Gregory Addition?
Since 2003.
Okay, so about the same time, you moved in when they apparently were beginning to treat adults. And until now, you had no idea adults were there.
Right, had no idea until, we had incidents in the neighborhood where cars were broken into, but we never put two and two together.
Were they the adults or were they the kids?
Running through our neighborhood, it been both.
Well, what I'm trying to understand here is I understand the adults are in the hospital area that is secure. The juveniles live up in a dorm in an unsecure area. So I guess, and I too read the Daily Oklahoman. Okay. And reading it yesterday, it talked about incidents in the last year in which the police were called, and apparently 2 out of 13 had to do with adults. Well, I guess my question is, are you having trouble with the kids, the juveniles, or are you having trouble with the adults?
I haven't seen juvenile through the neighborhood, but I have seen adults in the neighborhood. Early in the morning, when my wife is going to work, right, she have called me back and informed me there's some people walking the streets in the neighborhood.
Okay, and were they escapees or somebody just walking in the neighborhood?
No, they wasn't resident of our neighborhood. They was people outside our neighborhood. And being that far off, I don't think it was the people from under the bridge, so the only place we could look at is Cedar Ridge.
Thank you.
Thank you. Your name and address for us again, please.
Yes, my name is Michael Sanders, and I live at 5500 Northeast 54th. That is also in the Gregories. And I'm going to be brief. I am here to represent the Northeast Sooner Concerned Homeowners Association Incorporated and the Gregories Residential Addition. I am a resident of the Gregories and the Homeowners Association president. The Gregories is located at the corner of Northeast 50th and Sooner Road, less than 3/4 of a mile west of Cedar Ridge on 50th. The Gregory has 31 concerned homeowners living within our community. Our greatest concern is the number of runaways this calendar year from Cedar Ridge, and we have a number of 11, but we cannot verify that. Cedar Ridge runaways are less than 10 to 15-minute walking distance from our community. We are concerned with the safety of our children and our retirees. Without some form of notification system in place, the possibility of first contact with our children and retirees has put an element of fear in our community. The Northeast Sooner Concerned Homeowners Association would like this commission to deny Special Permit 465 and require Special Permit 291 to be complied with by Cedar Ridge, and any future expansions have the necessary safety precautions to ensure the safety of its patients and the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
One question, sir.
Yes.
I keep getting confused. You cited 11 runaways. Now, were those adults or were they children?
We have no idea.
Well, you realize that what's before us is a permit to allow adults in the hospital. It doesn't have anything to do with the children. You know, sounds like you made a great point. There should be a warning system. I understand that. But that's not what's before us today. What's before us today is, are they allowed to treat adults in the hospital portion? And it doesn't have anything to do with the juvenile operation that I call up to the north end of the property. And I'm wrestling with this deal because I'm trying to figure out what is germane to this special permit request and what is in the way of complaints relating to the juvenile operation, which we're not hearing today.
Well, for our community, adults or juveniles, we'd like to be notified.
I understand that, and I think that's a great idea, and I would suggest, if they haven't already put something planned in motion, that they do that.
And if at all possible, we feel that if they're put back to 291, the necessary precautions will be put in place to ensure that any future expansions, they take in excess.
Well, again, future expansion comes to us as another special permit.
Yeah. That's for another day.
Yes, understandable.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Gypsy Hogan. I live at 4425 Northeast 63rd, which is actually a couple of miles from the property. But I understand that you guys are usually used to dealing with neighborhood situations in the city proper. I was in the Mester Park Neighborhood Association before this, and I can tell you it's a real different situation. I'm a couple of miles, but I'm only a 30 or 40-minute walk through fields, open fields and woods to get to my house, so it's a different situation. And you're asking whether it's juveniles or adults. I think the situation is people are concerned it doesn't matter which it is.
I fully understand that, ma'am, but again, what's before us is a permit to allow part of these hospital beds that we are presently permitting juveniles to be allowed to be used for adults. And what Cedar Ridge has is, as I understand it, two separate operations. The hospital operation, which is secure, and the juvenile operation, which is basically not secure. Those kids can theoretically leave if they want, I understand. They're not supposed to, but you know, they're not locked up.
Right, and obviously the adults that are supposed to be locked down, they leave also, because in that report you just mentioned there were 2 adults involved in those 13 in the last year. Is that what I heard you say?
Well,
I think I read that
and when I followed
myself.
up with the police department on that, apparently one of those was someone who actually signed themselves out of the facility, left against medical advice. Yeah.
Well, I think what I'm trying to say, too, though, is that you're asking us questions that we really may not know the answer
Well, no,
to.
I understand, but what I want you guys to understand is what's before us is not whether they do a good job with the kids, and
I
as the
understand.
gentleman before you mentioned, the alarm system sounds like a good idea to me, but again, that's not something for us.
Right. Well, in looking at the staff report that I saw from May 22nd, what I really wanted to address was that I was concerned there were a number of things that weren't there that I wanted to be sure that you heard about, and some of the things have already been mentioned in speakers before me about the number of petitions and the mayor of Forest Park who had sent her concern. I would also have liked for the report to mention the public hearing that was held just a few weeks ago at Spring Lake, and it was really it turned into kind of a contentious meeting between the neighbors and Cedar Ridge's attorney and CEO. And it was where residents were questioning why the facility had no fencing, why they had no security cameras, why they had no alert system, which they have been required to do, this company in other parts of the country, and why there were so many escapes. And the neighbors described finding Cedar Ridge patients on their front porches, as have been mentioned, but they also mentioned being awakened in the middle of the night with police cars in their pastures and police officers going through their outbuildings looking for people, and helicopters hovering overhead. The stories made me wonder if the staff report should not have also mentioned the additional cost and strain on our police services. I understand that in a northeast Oklahoma County, you go north of 50th and east of M.L. King, on any given night, there's only 2 police officers patrolling that whole area. So I think there's a tremendous strain on the services of that area that are being asked. I don't think anyone here is opposed to mental health treatment. I don't think anyone here wants to stop mental health treatment. I think everyone here agrees that there's a huge need for it. I think the people in this area are doing their part. There are 7 other wards in this city. There's a lot of other square miles. There's a room for an adult facility in the Deaconess area.
We're kind of getting off track here.
But you see what I'm saying. I mean, you're right. That all gets off track, and yet that's what we've heard a lot about. So, but thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to have to leave. I'd like to make a couple of comments.
Okay.
I'm really not understanding how a company buys another company without checking to see if that company is in compliance. I have a hard time understanding that.
Could I answer that question?
No. Okay.
Wait.
No, let him.
We're not asking a question.
I am not in any way against mental health, period. I think that's something we have to have. But I am an advocate of being in compliance. And in this particular case, there's some things that I found out today that I didn't know. And because of that, I cannot support this application. I just don't understand how a company, and it's my understanding through what I've heard today, that this company not only here has been out of compliance, but it's been out of compliance in other places as well. And that bothers me, and I cannot support this application on that premise.
Okay, Bob, you had a...
I've practiced transactional law for 45 years. Every single purchase and sale agreement has representations and warranties in it that this business complies with all rules, regulations, etc. There's no way in the world that this was missed. Or they can sue the seller, or they can sue the lawyers for malpractice. There's no way. It was like, well, we can just do this.
In my opinion, I've heard enough, and I would be willing to make a motion to get a vote before I have to leave.
Let me just say something about that, Jim.
No, excuse me. Quiet, please.
Just say something, Jim. And basically, we've kind of got a feel for both sides of this argument. We got a feel for what's really happening on both sides. I don't think no one in this room is against mental health or the treatment of an adolescent or an adult mental health. But when I look at this thing for what it is, the application today says that it is an application now seeking to include the option to treat adults as part of the current maximum 116 beds. That's what 465 says. In 291, it stated that this application was for the adolescent psychiatric facility. That's clear. That's just clear. When it was approved and the operation of what it should be operating as, or what the original intent of the special permit, one thing the special permit did not do, it did not limit the number of buildings that you could build, but it did limit to who was being treated at this facility, and it increased it to a capacity of 116 adolescents at an adolescent facility. And there's a principle that I feel that has been overlooked for whatever the reason. And we can keep going over that and over that. But I believe if you're faithful over a little bitty thing, you really exemplify your faithfulness over 291, then you'll be given the responsibility of more. And that's what I'm seeing is now in place, is that we have not been faithful over 291, and I could not support this application as it's presented. I'd like to see the applicant go back and be faithful over 291, operate 291 the way it should be operated, and then at some point, maybe you can come back and look at it. I can't support it as it stands right now.
Is that your motion?
And I make a motion that we deny this application.
I'll second.
And that's based on non-compliance?
Based on
291?
non-compliance of the original special permit, 291, in contrast with the permit, the request in 465.
Okay. There's a motion before us. Any further discussion, Commissioners? Cast your votes. And it is denied. Take it. These guys go to the bathroom.
Nick, who is right on?
Take a 10-minute recess. We're going to adjourn for 10 minutes.
JJ, you run everybody off.
He left me at a great time.
Gentlemen, sorry to keep you waiting, but some of us needed a serious break here.
Okay, so back to item 16, ABC 804, for an ABC2 overlay of the C3, UD, and TT districts located at 730 Northwest 23rd Street.
And as usual, your names and address, please.
Wayne Allen. I live at 3732 North Chartel. I'm one of the owners of Gaiudes, located at 730 Northwest 23rd Street. Just like to start by saying, Gaiudes is going to be we're going to be a nice restaurant. We're going to be serving an eclectic blend of colorful, plated, dressed-up entrees. We're not going to be a dive bar or a dance club or music venue. Excuse me. We have addressed all of the initial concerns from Mesta Park regarding noise pollution and parking. We have a petition with nearly 900 signatures of support, as well as 22 letters written by actual Mesta Park residents. That being said, I know that it was I know that it was the Planning Commission asking for a SPUD, not the surrounding neighborhoods. We put a lot of time and thought into what was said, and we feel that moving forward with the SPUD, putting restrictions on our hours of operation would have a pretty large negative effect on our business model. Since day one, in putting together our concept and doing our business plan, excuse me, I don't know how I'm nervous, there's no one in here. But from the beginning, we've wanted to bring a great menu, and with fresh, never frozen ingredients, dressed up plates, and have it available during alternative hours. We believe that there's a lot of people in the city that eat past 10 p.m., and at this point, unfortunately, they're limited to mainly fast food restaurants and 24-hour diners. And that's something we're trying to change. So we're here to ask for approval for our ABC2 overlay.
Commissioners, no one signed up today? Nobody's talking?
Okay, I'll move approval.
Is there a second?
I move denial of the application.
Second. Mr. Chairman, before we vote, before we suggested you come back with an SPUD, matter of fact, twice. You've told us twice now that's, you're not going to be a dive bar and all that thing. We're not necessarily that concerned about you. We're concerned that this runs with the land forever, and the next guy may be. And without that, we have no control. And I don't know if you heard us before, but you're going to hear us now. I can't support this either for that reason. I'm not against what you're necessarily doing. I think with proper controls, it's a good thing. You're not willing to do that, so our only course is denial.
I appreciate that. That being said, if someone were to, if I hate even thinking this, but if for some reason we weren't successful, and like you said, someone came in after us, they still would have to have a restaurant. I mean, they wouldn't be able to open up a bar. They'd have to serve 51% food.
No, they could actually be a bar. ABC3.
We're asking for ABC2.
Oh, ABC2. I'm sorry.
Right, we're just
they
asking.
Still have to be a restaurant. That is true. But you're saying I'm getting cross parking and I'm doing all that. They don't have to do any of that. They can blare the music till 2 a.m. as loud as they possibly can.
Well, there are actually noise ordinances. I mean,
Well, the noise ordinance isn't good enough. We're asking for more. You guys have said no. Mr. Chairman, there's a motion on the floor.
I just kind of, there's one thing here, you can count, I know you can, and this is, I feel very confident in saying the way that I vote depends on how you want to proceed. If you want to go ahead and move this to council.
yeah, I mean, I think that's, I mean, obviously we'd really appreciate approval from you guys, but no, if that's our option, we'd like to move to city council. Appreciate your guys' time.
Okay. Cast your votes. And, oh, Jim's light. We can get it there. 4.
Sorry.
There we are. So the motion, application is denied. You're on your way to council. Thank you.
Items 17 through 21 are continued.
Right.
So we're on item 23, which is an ordinance to be introduced today and set for public hearing on June 12th. It's relating to the Planning and Zoning Code, Chapter 59. This is pertaining to use standards related to animal raising.
Minus chickens.
This was a ordinance that was passed by council that was related to urban agriculture practices, and there was a inadvertent omission of a important provision in that is being reinserted back into the code, and so this is just correcting that action.
John, the same comment. Could we add chickens to this one?
No.
Never mind.
Okay. Well, let me just explain. That what this does is puts everything back in place the way it has been for a very, very long time. No change.
So what you're saying is no progress after all this effort. Okay, we have a motion and a second to set item 23. Cast your votes. And that is set. And now we have Planning Commission committees. Well, Mike's not here, so Planning Commission members, anything? Planning Department? Development Services? Municipal Counselor? Motion to adjourn. We're done. Thank you.